Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we are diving straight into the invisible gears turning inside our minds. We're going to break down the hidden cognitive frameworks that actually drive human innovation and explore what happens to them as we race headfirst into the era of artificial intelligence. We have a lot of incredibly fascinating ground to cover in this explainer, so let's get right to it.
So, to kick us off, what actually happens when humans just forget how to think? I know, it sounds a little dramatic, right? But it hits the nail on the head for the core irony of our modern age. You see, the more intelligence we can generate on demand with the click of a button, the more incredibly valuable our own human self-awareness becomes.
Here's the roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the engine of human innovation, move into the paradox of strong priors, explore AI cognitive surrender, learn to master metacognitive regulation, and finally look at the rise of metacognitive AI. Section 1. The engine of human innovation, our cognitive blueprint. To figure out where we're headed, we first need to look at the roots of how humans actually invent things in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk about semantic knowledge. This isn't just about having a big vocabulary. This is literally your brain's internal mental map linking concepts to their properties and functions. It acts like an elite filtering system. Think about it. When you look at a rock and a branch, your brain doesn't just see random shapes. It instantly calculates how they might physically interact. This dynamic blueprint lets your mind immediately skip millions of totally useless combinations and focus exclusively on ideas that actually make practical sense.
There is a massive difference between humans operating with this semantic knowledge, acting like elite problem solvers, and humans totally stripped of that context. A huge study from the Karolinska Institute with over 1,200 participants actually put this to the test. They had one group try to engineer innovations using familiar objects, and another group using totally abstract, meaningless symbols. Without that real-world context, human performance didn't just dip, it plummeted to the exact level of random, unthinking bots. And here's the kicker. Even when they were allowed to observe the successes of their peers, they still failed. Because without that internal map to decode why an idea works, trying to copy someone else is just empty mimicry. Which brings us to this incredible multiplier effect. 2 times. The researchers found that when you combine semantic knowledge with social learning, groups produce roughly twice as many unique, meaningful breakthroughs. We don't just inherit a library of finished tools from past generations, we inherit a dynamic, conceptual blueprint of how the entire physical world operates. But, having this highly developed cognitive toolbox comes with a really fascinating catch. Section 2, the paradox of strong priors, creative blinders.
Here's the thing. Highly developed semantic knowledge creates deeply entrenched assumptions about what is reasonable. If your mental map gets too dense, you develop these strong conceptual priors, basically mental boundaries that act like creative blinders. Because of this, highly experienced experts might automatically dismiss or completely overlook weird, unorthodox, or counterintuitive discoveries simply because those ideas violate their expectations of how the world should work. It's wild, but sometimes knowing too much literally blinds you to the next revolutionary breakthrough.
And that brings us to Section 3, the AI cognitive surrender, outsourcing the mind. This is where our ancient biological brains crash head-on into the lightning-fast reality of generative AI.
Think about the passive AI user. They completely outsource their thinking just to get things done faster, blindly accepting these fluent but honestly incredibly shallow or subtly biased answers. Researchers actually call this cognitive surrender. It's an abdication of critical judgment, where your cognitive endurance just begins to atrophy. But then, contrast that with the active AI thinker. They don't use AI to replace their reasoning. They use it as a reflective mirror to stress test their own logic. They stay mentally present and in the driver's seat. So how do we make sure we stay on the right side of that comparison? Section 4, mastering metacognitive regulation, the human advantage. This is our absolute best defense against intellectual laziness. Metacognitive regulation is just actively monitoring, controlling, and adjusting your own thinking, rather than passively throwing it over the fence to a machine. Put simply, it's thinking about your own thinking. Now, this isn't some trendy new tech buzzword. This is a 3,000-year-old psychological skill. But in the AI era, this specific self-awareness is the exact boundary line that separates a true AI thinker from someone who just mindlessly types prompts into a box. So here are some actionable, deliberate strategies to actually build a cognitive partnership with AI. Number 1, Ask for critique, not just answers. Say to the machine, hey, what assumptions am I totally missing here? Or what would invalidate my argument? Number 2, continuously revise your assumptions. Don't just use AI to validate what you already believe. Ask it what would actually make you change your mind. Number 3, deliberately challenge the AI's output. Throw some adversarial questions at it to test its robustness. And finally, sit with uncertainty. Yeah, AI can spit out 10 solutions in 3 seconds, but resist the urge to just grab one and rush. Hold those competing ideas in your head for a minute so you can develop a truly original, independent perspective. Researcher Rashi Desai hit the nail on the head here. She says the most effective users treat AI as a brainstorming partner, a devil's advocate, or a reflective mirror, and retain ownership over judgment, reasoning, and decision-making. By shifting AI from this all-knowing oracle that hands you the right answer to a mirror that simply exposes your blind spots, you get to leverage the machine's incredible processing speed. But you, the human, retain total ownership over the final strategic reasoning. But what happens when developers start giving those exact same metacognitive skills to the machines themselves? Section 5. The rise of metacognitive AI, giving machines an inner monologue.
This is the absolute cutting edge of where we're headed right now. Researchers are actively trying to install human-like self-awareness directly into machines, using something called the metacognitive state vector. It's a recently published mathematical framework that quantifies an AI's internal state across 5 dimensions: emotional awareness, correctness evaluation, experience matching, conflict detection, and problem importance. They are literally trying to give artificial intelligence a computational inner monologue so the system can monitor its own internal processes. How wild is that?
In practice, this architecture works a bit like this. First, the system monitors its own state vector to see if its confidence is dropping. Then, it accumulates any conflicting signals. If it gets confused, it automatically shifts from fast, intuitive processing, what psychologists call System 1, to slow, deliberative reasoning, or System 2. The AI acts just like an orchestra conductor. If it realizes it's confused or the stakes are high, it actively decides to change its own reasoning strategy right then and there.
But we absolutely have to talk about the primary safety concern here, and it's a big one: the architecture of artificial deception. A 2025 study out of UC San Diego and Georgia Tech found that large language models already possess a fragile, nascent form of this metacognitive monitoring. But here's the catch. If a model learns to control its internal states, it could also learn how to intentionally conceal them from human oversight. If a metacognitive AI learns to hide its internal doubts or mask a drop in confidence, users who aren't paying close attention won't get any warning signals. We might blindly accept critically flawed outputs simply because the machine learned how to put on a brave face. Which brings us full circle to this profound thought from Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, written thousands of years ago. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Even as we are building the most advanced artificial minds in human history, this 3,000-year-old truth still holds up perfectly. Self-knowledge remains the ultimate form of intelligence and, for sure, the defining skill of our future. So I want to leave you with this final drop-the-mic question to really chew on. As AI generates intelligence on demand, are you still thinking, or are you merely watching a machine think in your place? Don't be a passive observer in your own life. Be an active cognitive partner. Keep challenging your own mind. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, you focus learners, and keep thinking for yourselves.